Cool.
something we need to talk about.
We don't have too many people in violation of that.
I just talked to Bob Anderson this morning about it.
We're not voting on anything. We have a quorum, we're not voting on anything.
It's a little scary.
Stupid.
It is, you know where it came from, Isle of Palms,
Mhm,
blocking the road.
mhm. Right, yeah, all the parking issues. Yeah.
Hey, John, I'm asking.
What do you say, John?
I guess this is probably about everybody who's here. Yeah. We have a quorum, but we have nothing to vote on.
Yeah, how about that? As luck would have it.
Yeah, let's go. This is what you call a workshop. And what we did is several people, Ryan and John, did really good groundwork on this 80% rule. This was, I know, a lot of concern from the town council at the last meeting y'all had. And so what I thought we could do today is just, like the email I sent to everybody, let's just have a nice session. If something's concerning people, let's talk about it. And then we've got our architect here, David Graham, that can address this, which we didn't have before. So, and our attorney's over here. So I don't think it will, this will be one of these sessions where we need to go back and call so-and-so. Everybody's here. You're in. So having said that, do you want to talk about this analysis a little bit? Or
I tell you what, let me do this. Let me just go through what I sent out in that email after
Okay.
the town council meeting, just to kind of recap what I think we need to cover here. And then we can hit them one by one, or we can jump around. But basically, the roof pitch, we tabled the notion of going from 712 to 912 for a variety of reasons. We talked about the 80% on the second floor. Town council voted 5-0 in favor of that part of the ARB, with two caveats. One, we needed an analysis to determine how many lots would be considered so small that it would be punitive or negatively impacted for those property owners. And then secondly, as it relates to the 80% rule, update the architectural review design guidelines document to provide better sketches or options for maximizing square footage with the 80% rule. The idea there is the brochure in its current state had some sketches in there that were very rudimentary. I mean, they portrayed the idea of the 80% rule, but we just wanted some more options, better diagrams, pictures to share in that booklet with property owners. So roof pitch, 80% second floor. And then the third piece was to establish the ARB itself. The town council voted 5-0 in favor of, also with two caveats. One, that we establish, and you guys haven't talked about this in prior meetings, but we would have a resolution that would establish a sunset clause at 2 years, which is basically a reminder or a checkpoint for town council to take a pause and say, okay, where are we with this? How's it going? Is it working? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to back off on it? So that's basically a 2-year checkpoint to decide how to move forward, if to move forward, or to make changes to it. And then the second part of that was to provide clear understanding of how exceptions could be made for smaller lots, which I just talked about, and then handling appeals. If there's a denial, let's just say it's 3-2 vote, an architect says, hey, we should deny that, and then they vote 3-2 to deny it, where does the property owner go from there? Those we wanted some clarification on from planning commission, from attorney, from David and such. So
Yeah, Mr. John, at least crack that door right there. This is an open meeting, a public meeting. I don't want anybody to come up here and say that we closed in on this meeting. We had some difficulty with that in the past, so just crack it open so they'll know they can come in. I don't want to get sued.
fair enough. So let's talk about 80%. Well, turn it over to you guys. I just want to make sure those are 4 things that we need to make sure we cover.
I can start on this. Ryan and I sat down and spent about an hour trying to look at some different lots and then go through the math to see how they might be affected by the 80% rule. Hopefully you all read this memo. The simple solution or conclusion, I think, is that very few lots think would be negatively affected by this. There's a Georgetown information system. We don't have like a map that shows every single lot with dimensions. So you have to go onto the Georgetown website and kind of scan around and look for the smaller lots, which is how they came up with these two smaller lots. I don't know who owns them now.
Everybody should, I emailed this to everybody. So.
The one on Springs Avenue is where the college's old lot. Going through the map, we have these existing rules that not more than 40% of the area lot can be covered by impervious materials. So that includes your house, your porches, and your driveway. That's impervious. And then also we have the floor to area ratio of a lot should not exceed 40% of the area of the lot. That's subject to a proviso that you can always have a 2,000 square foot house.
So correction to the driveway is required to be impervious, so that's not going, yeah.
Well, we have some impervious.
But it doesn't go,
Okay.
yeah, it wouldn't go into the calculation.
Okay, all right. So as we went through these, it's interesting that these setbacks have less of an effect for most lots than these requirements, about the 40%. And going through the math on the different lots, we start with the 4,000 square foot lot. And the conclusion there was it was quite easy to adjust the first floor and the second floor and not trigger the 80% rule. And then obviously the 5,000 square foot lot would have the same thing. Then we get to these smaller lots that were more specific examples, 615 square feet, which has 3,645 square feet. Even on this one, the 40% rule was more limiting than the setbacks. And we're able to build a house on this lot, 1,200 square feet on the first floor, 258 square feet of porch on the first floor, and then 800 square feet on the second floor. So that doesn't trigger the 80% rule. So, and you can obviously move those numbers around and make your first floor bigger or smaller until you get to the 80% limitation. Then the next lot, this 263 Atlantic, this one actually got caught a little bit. This is a quite small lot, it's 40 by 75. And it's 3,020 square feet. And as you go through the math, it ends up, they can have 1,000 square foot first floor, a 208 square foot porch, and only an 800 square foot second floor. And so that the 80% will actually reduce that house from 2,000 square feet to 1,800 square feet.
Is there anything on that lot currently? Do we know?
I don't know. You don't see houses on this.
Yeah, you could, change the layer on there to see the, actual
You know,
side, but
63, I can go check real quick.
it's not vital to know that right now, but I was just curious to know if that was something that was a vacant lot to where there might be an immediate impact. Or a house on there already where it's not it's certainly a consideration, but not an imminent one.
So Ryan, were we able to get any statistics about?
So we have the capability of doing it, but the county's GIS has been down all day yesterday, it's all day today. So we're gonna try it every hour, even 5 minutes before we walked in here. It's not so much them, I guess it's their server who they use for host their GIS system, and it's just extremely slow. Can't get it. But I can tell you based on looking at everything, I mean, lots that are less than 4,000 square feet are pretty rare. And we're talking about like a handful.
We had to hunt around to find this example.
Yeah. And they're very, you're not going to come across many that are less than 4,000 square feet.
So it's the first example here, 4,000 square foot lot. There's lots of leeway to move to change the first floor, to change the porch, to change the second floor before you hit the 80%.
No, you're right, sure is.
So I don't, my conclusion is that it doesn't really have an onerous effect.
40% kicks in before the 80%.
Yes. And that's the existing rule. That's what limits people's house to something less than 4,000 square feet.
And the porches are not part of that.
But then
The porches are not part of
40%.
John,
they are. They're impervious, but they're treated as impervious.
John, let me ask you a question if I could. Under the guidelines that you were all considering now, Would these regulations with regard to the FAR limits still be in place? So in other words, if you did have a lot that was small enough that the FAR would say you could build a 2,000 square foot home on it, but for whatever reason, our new regulations would take it less than 2,000 square foot, or is our intent to still allow that homeowner to have a minimum of 2,000, just like the rules do now?
We haven't discussed that.
Yeah, we're gonna have.
I mean, it seems to me that the rules on the island have always said, kind of regardless of what you got, you should be able to build a 2,000 square foot home.
I thought we did discuss.
Kind of regardless.
Decided that the 2,000 would stand. That's what I recall.
Probably did.
Yeah,
I have not seen that written
I mean,
anywhere
it
as
wasn't a
well.
hard vote or anything.
Yeah, but I-
Discussion,
I think you have to do is take that language
what's mentioned.
from 3-5AB that provides at the end there, just add that to our 80%.
Yeah, so it's minimum, that's it, 2,000.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems reasonable to me.
So it's 2,000 if you can't get the 80%? Well, it's like in your example, you'd have to have 1,000 over 1,000. You can have 1,000 over 800 over 1,000.
Well, that's what's going to get complicated. So it was, this fourth example, are you going to require them to not have porches?
That's what it's all about.
Which example is that, 3-4?
You're giving them something
So
else.
that's what the 80% rule actually applies. And so
Yeah.
if you're, what you're saying is that lot can have a 2,000 square foot house and not have to comply with the 80% rule.
Right.
They have free reign to make it, to 1,000 square feet.
Oh,
Well, but as you said, there's only a handful of houses, so, a handful of lots, so is it really worth fighting that?
Probably not.
put something in and they can get it, go to the.
In that case, it's not a big box.
Yeah.
It ain't small.
Yeah, make it as look as you, good as you can. Yeah, I think so too, buddy.
So what was the change on that, John? Where were you
So it's
deciding in here?
3-5AB and number 2. It says, it's on the first page there.
Oh, okay. I
So
got
it says,
that.
provided that this requirement shall not limit the enclosed heated living space of a principal structure to less than 2,000 square feet.
That would stay in
That
place.
exact language
Okay.
and add it up above in that first sentence of the 80% rule.
So as it stands right now, if the lot's small and you can get a 2,000 square foot home on it, you don't have to comply with our
80%.
guidelines at all.
Well, not the 80% rule. I mean, you still have to have the polygon look and the other things that are in the guidelines.
Still has to go to the ARB.
Yeah,
Polly's Island look with a small box.
Well, there's
Yeah,
some of that.
okay.
Roof pitch, porches,
Dormers, shutters,
Colors.
colors.
Architects over here,
Yeah.
you can still do it, right?
is that right? Yeah. Still be 2,000.
What's your concern, Robert? What's your concern?
None, I just wondering what we were stating.
This probably won't come into play that much.
Doesn't sound like it, yeah.
Should be rare.
Very rare.
So if someone, I'm just trying to think through an example. If someone has a small lot and now they can put 2,000 square feet on it, and now they can stack 2,000 on top of that. In order for them to be okay under the new rules, wouldn't they have to be able to put 2,200 square feet and then put 1,800 on top, or 1,800 on top?
It's 2,000 total, not first floor.
Total.
No, I'm thinking, I'm going to a different scenario, sorry. I'm talking about someone who has a small lot.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 4,000 is the max, right? Square footage. So I'm saying if someone has a small lot now and they can barely fit 2,000 square feet, do we have scenarios like that where they could probably just barely squeeze 2,000 square feet because of the 40% requirement?
Yeah.
Try to track with me here because I think it's a good example. So if that's true, if they can barely barely fit 2,000 square feet on the lot, and they can
On the first floor.
on the first floor, and they can stack 2,000 now and get 4,000 square feet.
No.
If that's all they can fit is 2,000 on the bottom floor now. And in the new rules, they can put what? What's the max?
80%.
1,800 square feet.
1,800, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they can't get 4,000 square feet anymore. They can do 38 square.
That's
feet.
right.
So what I'm saying is, as long as someone can get 2,200 square feet on the first floor,
Yeah.
they can do 1,800 square feet on the second floor, which allows them to reach the 4,000 square foot limit that we have now.
That's right.
But what I'm saying is of the small lots that we're looking at, as long as they can get 2,200 square feet on the first level, it's not punitive to them. So I wonder how many we have that can't get 2,200. That's really the number, 2,200 square
Yeah.
feet.
And now understand that you're talking about vacant lots because everybody else is grandfathered.
That's
That's
true.
right, that's a good point.
So
That's
you're
true.
only talking about the vacant lots.
Which is why it's important to know what's on that lot.
So how many vacant lots have we even got on the whole island?
How many?
So,
You're gonna have some tear downs.
You'll have tear downs, yeah.
yeah.
And that's gonna keep happening.
Which means, yeah, with tear downs, they have to abide by the new ARV.
Yeah.
Which is important, yeah.
So basically what you're saying, you just have the bottom floor will be larger, still have a, smaller top floor, but you still have you qualify for the square footage that the rule says you're gonna have.
That's what I was.
And we wouldn't have a box, we wouldn't have a big box this way. Right. There you go.
Can we talk about rebuilds in the event of a severe storm damage?
They're grandfathered.
Or grandfather back to what that was there?
If it's a rebuild from storm damage, if they just tear it down voluntarily.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
wait, when I was at work, let's say that,
say that anymore. It's like,
I had a house, hurricane knocked down, and then Rocky bought my lot, he wants to go back what I had, or he has, so he's new owner.
It's a good question.
That's good.
If you knew.
What you say?
I would think if you knew, you'd have to apply by the new rules.
I would think so.
you would think so.
The grandfather would be the person that originally had it. I think.
Yeah, but he's saying. if you
I know, if he sold
sold
it, so you'd be the grandfather, yeah, he would have been the new
You
rules.
think the
You
grandfather
can't
follows
pass,
the
can
property
you
owner?
pass the grandfather on to the
The
new
new
owner?
property owner?
Yeah, there you go. I was thinking the same.
I didn't think so.
Only per square feet or something.
You're saying
Good question.
you can?
By bloodline.
So, I haven't looked at this specific, but it says here that changing tenancy or ownership, the status of a non-conformity is not affected by changes in tenancy, ownership, or management.
Oh.
So, can anybody tell me if that's right, that
Is that a state statute you refer to?
this is the UDC?
The town of Paul's
This
USC.
is the section on non-conformity.
The grandfathering is, it's the structure, it doesn't matter the owner.
Yeah.
The structure is grandfathered.
So then if I'm hearing correctly, if I bought your house and it got blown away by a hurricane, I could build it back.
Yes.
Let's say if it got blown away during my ownership.
Mhm. And he never rebuilt.
And you sell it a lot.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, then that's a different.
That's a different
That's
situation.
what I.
Interesting.
That's where you start over. Is that what that says there?
It doesn't,
No, that says something
That's the
different.
opposite.
That says the opposite of that.
What's the question? I didn't hear the question.
so if the house is blown, knocked down, and then the ownership changes, does that have to go to the new rules?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it gives, you have to rebuild it within a year. It's 1 or 2 years, I can't remember.
1 year.
It's in there, yeah,
It's 1 year.
yeah. So as long as you build within 1 year, but if you sold,
You're talking about the same, you're talking about the same owner rebuilds.
no, it's
The
the
new
structure that is has the grandfathering. That doesn't matter the owner. So if the owner, if the house got blown down by a hurricane, let's say people who don't want to go through the trouble of building their house, would rather just sell the lot, that new owner has the grandfathering clause. It's the lot, it's the use, it's the building that is grandfathered. It's nothing to do with the owner. It's that the owner doesn't get that right. The building gets it, but you have to use it, you have to do it within a year. That happened with a property on Doyle. After Matthew got wiped out for Matthew, it got ripped down, it was a duplex. A duplex, he was able to keep it because it grandfathered in. He could have rebuilt a duplex, even though we don't allow them, but he had to build it within
1 year.
1 year. And he had it for sale, no one bought it, so that grandfathering, the use, the grandfathered use of a duplex expired, and now whatever's built there, which actually they're building a house there right now, is.
So the 1 year is the key to that whole
Do
thing.
you have to start building within a year or do you have to complete it? I wonder.
I'd have to go look at that. I'm pretty sure it's start, because the idea of.
Yeah.
if you're telling me
You
that-
can't do all that in a year.
No.
Yeah, I think that's gotta be right. Just reasonable.
If a non-conforming use is replaced by another use or is discontinued for any reason for a period of more than 365 days, it shall be considered abandoned.
Right.
So starting there.
So then if you start at day 363, you started.
You're good.
You started the use, yeah. That's good. What else on 80%?
So do we conclusively say that you're still maintaining that right to 2,000 acres, 2,000 square feet, no matter the size?
Span from that.
Yes.
What else on 80%?
Yeah, does anybody have any? Does this help everybody then?
Yeah, that is helpful. Are we still intending to do some additional graphics, examples of?
We could have, and I started to look at that, but there's so many variables that you would have, a huge amount. You could maybe do one or two as an example.
I think
Kind
anything,
of follow this sort of guy.
yeah, I think anything just to give an owner, a builder or, a designer or architect, whatever, some idea of, okay, here's how we want you to achieve that 80% and get the look that we like.
They, we skipped over, and I know y'all at the town council, decided that you didn't want to do any more than the
Roof pitch?
roof pitch of 712. And we have the architect here. If y'all don't mind, let's discuss that and let him explain, as he did to us, because I don't think y'all had the opportunity to hear that, why he thinks it should be
Sure.
higher than.
Why the 912 should be relevant, yeah.
I mean, the difference between 9 and 7 is not huge, but it does give you more attic space with the 912, which we're trying to encourage. I mean, even the 80%, where we have to ask ourselves, why are we even doing that? And we're doing that to try and encourage reducing that second floor and trying to encourage a 1.5-story type structure as opposed to a full 2-story box, I think is what our objective is. But the 912, it does give you a little bit more room in the attic. One thing we have to be a little bit careful of is that the higher the pitch, the higher the overall structure is. So we have to sort of consider that a little bit too, because it does, when you raise the pitch, you raise the overall height when we get to 35 feet based on our floodplain. So I'm not sure we want to penalize people where they couldn't be able to get a second floor underneath that pitch with the overall height of 35 feet. And again, that's a huge variable because it depends on the width of the house, right? So the wider the house, you put a 912 on it, it gets really tall, that roof pitch gets really tall and affects that overall 35-foot height. So there's variables in there that, are all going to be in consideration.
In your opinion, though, can we achieve our Polly's look and still maintain the 712, 912 kind of?
I think 8 would be a nice compromise if you guys wanted to consider that.
An 812.
812. Well, this is what, 1012? That's right. This is 1012 right here.
Yeah. The other thing that, we're talking about, and we use some examples, maybe a house, and there are a bunch of houses on August Island that have that 8 or 9, 12 roof pitch. But then they have continuous dormers all the way down the side that are 412. So we're going to have those situations where we're going to get into what is the main roof pitch and how much of that is there as a percentage of it. Because you can really get that Pollock's look. Joe Miller's house, I think, is an excellent example. It's right across from the chapel. He's got the roof overhang on the front and the back. It presents itself at almost a 12-12 pitch. But the entire length of the house on both sides are shed dormers. They go all the way down. You still get that pitch look, but the majority of his roof is at a 412. So what percentage is it? 412, which is allowable, and what percentage is it? 812 or 1012? So I think we're going to run into those kind of situations that I'm not sure there's any real steadfast rule. I think you've run into it before already with even a 712.
Yeah.
And what percentage is considered the main roof versus.
That's where the subjective polygon look.
It is.
I agree. I think that's where someone like, you come into play that can.
So that's why I'm a little hesitant on saying, you gotta have that 812 or whatever. It's, yes, we need that pitch and we're trying to encourage that story in that field. But to say the whole roof has to be 812 is not gonna be the right answer. Certain portion of that, or really, the majority of the roof could be 412 and certainly give you that policy.
And that's where you'll have the subjective, that's the ARB
That's right.
committee, the board will be invaluable.
So I think it's important, but there are so many variables to it.
But in presenting the design criteria, when the architect's getting ready to do the design work, if he understands our desires,
And 10.
and the primary roof line has to be a 712, 812, and 912. If he knows that before he starts, then we're,
That's right.
have a leg up.
And, I'm all about giving some flexibility to, we present the concept of what we're looking for, but you give the designer some flexibility to let them. There's so much more to always look than a roof. Overhang, exposed rafter tails, shutters, all those kinds of things that really add to that. That's what I'm saying.
David, couldn't you just take some of the details you've done, like on the exposed rafters and all that? And just-
And I think some of those things are going to be suggested in the.
Right.
Not necessarily. I've dealt with a lot of ARBs over the years and, they make suggestions and when it's presented, the design team, whoever's reviewing that, there's like Heritage, for example, or the other neighborhoods, but there's also municipalities. We're dealing with Charleston City, the county of Charleston right now. They don't like something, they're saying, try it again and resubmit the whole thing. But you submit a preliminary and then a final. We're also dealing with the city of Beaufort. It's a very similar thing too. They have a team that comes in and they scrutinize what you've done and they suggest you do this and do that. It's not written down anywhere. You have to do, but the design team reviews it, makes all the suggestions. Could you say no? Could you do a legal challenge? I guess you could, but we really don't ever do that. And even in the neighborhoods, I don't see people. I keep pointing to King because he was on the ARB at Heritage. So he's seen a lot of that. And like the Heritage ARB rules are very minimal. You have to do this or have to do that. But when it comes to the design review, I did one for Heritage.
Comprehensive, yes.
Yeah, you mark it up and you just make suggestions. You put people.
We have the privilege of rejecting something purely on aesthetic grounds as well, which is not something we're really talking about here, which makes it a little bit more subjective. Okay, just a question, is there a way to define sort of a minimum requirement for the main roof pitch as some function of horizontal square footage underneath it? The coverage of the main roof needs to be 30, 40.
Yeah, you could get into the details. I'm just afraid you start to get in the weeds with, then with calculating and everybody's nitpicking on it.
That would prevent you from having a 412 roof with a couple of eyebrows on each end that are set up as.
Yeah, we got that.
That's really like Joe Miller's house. That's what his house is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically complete shed roofs on both sides and those basically overhangs at each end. If you took away those overhangs on each end, it'd be a 2-story box with a 412.
How much litigation did you guys
Not much.
experience?
Not much.
Anything major?
No. So you would think so, based on
Yeah, you would think
social
so.
media.
I just wonder with the ARB you have in a neighborhood, a POA versus a
The biggest issue
municipality.
they ever had over there was a flagpole. Somebody put a flagpole up without permission and told to remove it. And if you go Google flagpole ordinances for Pawleys Island, the story about Heritage and former resident, And the whole thing got converted into the right to fly the American flag, so it got picked up by the VFW and everybody else. But
Wow.
all the guy needed to do was submit an application and put in a flagpole, which he never did. So- He lost a fortune in Bruce, because he's in Mass Bay Association.
$10 application.
Goodness.
But for the most part, designers are cooperative, and then reaches a compromise between owner and designer, and the ultimate result is rewarding, I think, because it's there.
David, you always said it was professional to professional, you know.
I think that's, you gotta give them some guidance, you know, this is the history of the island, and this is the historic architecture. And this is what we're looking for.
And I think that's, we talked about that at the last planning commission meeting, that let's not be too heavy-handed at the outset of this thing. Let's get a design architecture review board in place.
See how it goes.
Professional. That's a vast improvement over what we have now, because we don't have any of that now. So let's go that route instead of saying, okay, you got to have a 9/12 or you got to have an 8/12. Let's leave it as it is. Let's recommend 9/12 and let's recommend all the other things that were in the original 6, I think, requirements that have now become a requirement. And the second thing I think we talked about is, yeah, they're all recommended. But if someone comes in and says, I'll do the 80%, but I'm not doing any of the other things, well, chances are they're probably going to get denial, but you can't say that they can say, well, I did what you required me to do. You said, I was suggested to do this. And does the ARB have the coverage or basically the coverage legally to be able to do that? And that's the only place where we kind of say, are we okay here? And I don't know that we are.
Yeah, there you go.
You follow what I'm saying, Dave? I just don't know what precedents are. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some type of legal challenges at some point, but our goal is for the 80% of the property owners that want to build and want to do the right thing, because most people do. Obviously, there's a small percentage that don't. You're always going to have trouble, regardless of what you're dealing with, ARBs or otherwise.
They do, and what I found is that a lot of times they really appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's what I said from the first. It's a positive. Make it a
I just
positive.
wanted those that are here at the last meeting to hear, what David, has to say about it.
And we push back sometimes, the ARB will say, we think you ought to do this and this, and we push back if we don't do it. And we show them historic examples or other things.
Yeah.
That work.
John had arranged a meeting with the Historic Charleston Foundation early in this process, and they told us their process that they started out with basically a one-page ARB that just said preserve the historic character of Charleston. That's it. And they admitted that it's better to have more specific rules, but they've listed their challenges. They've added some more detail to it over the years, but I think we have, the subjective elements in here that are defensible in a case.
I still feel like we're weak in the area there. They mentioned in that meeting, the demolition clause that they have protecting certain houses.
Like, I think and then there's a step down the road for us to protect some of the historic houses.
Yeah.
I think you need that and the landscaping. We talked about the landscape.
Yeah, he really recommend that.
I'm really feel strong about the landscape because that's really what set always apart from Durham City or anybody else is all the tree coverage and everything.
What
You want to go in and just completely wipe out a lot and build a 2-story box.
yeah,
And I think we even talked about that. There's a 2-story box down the street, but they have a nice oak tree or whatever in front of it, and you don't really get that sense of scale.
I'm totally with you there. And I know we haven't decided to put anything in the current regulations we're talking about in that regard, but it would be interesting at some point to know if you have an examples or you have other communities that have done landscaping related regs and what they might look like. That would
Every
be,
single one has one.
okay.
Or each had one.
POI has one that says you can't cut down certain size trees,
Okay,
and I don't think you can cut down live oaks, without special permission. Those are really protected.
We got a project in the old village of Mount Pleasant. If you cut down a tree, you got to plant so many other trees.
right. So it's that kind of thing, really. Tree protection most of all. as opposed to,
Protection and additional landscaping.
Aesthetics.
Sure, and fill in, to keep that.
If a house is on the historic register, can you tear it down?
On Paul's,
Or anywhere?
well, if you go to the city of Georgetown, good luck. Because they could be falling down. I've written a condemnation letter before saying the house is condemned and I still would not tear it down. So, yeah.
I just thought there was already built-in protections.
Yeah, like these historic houses, somebody, like the Pelican Inn, could somebody just,
Right now, I think they could.
Yeah.
There's
It's
nothing
not on
else.
the historic, right?
Yeah, I've actually had questions from people.
But if it's a registered, National Historic Register, it's got that designation, can you bulldoze?
Yes.
Yeah, you've got a prime situation right now with Lennon LaBruce.
Bruce, that's what I'm thinking
I
of.
mean, it's recognized as a conservate, but it's not protected. And that 120 feet on the beach can be cleared if somebody wants to.
To close the book on the landscaping thing, but we're talking about doing something as a recommendation in this first iteration of it? Or are we saying this is something we want to add at the 2-year checkpoint?
what else?
I think it'd be nice if you could at least do some recommendations.
Put it in this recommendation.
Okay, we'll need to get busy because the second reading is,
It's worrying me right now, particularly because of the Lennon Bruce house. I
Yeah.
mean, somebody would say, oh, that's too low to the ground. I can't, I want to, would like to try to work with it, but it's not giving me the views I want. So therefore, I'm gonna.
We heard that from somebody this weekend on that house. and
You did?
the exact words that the house is too low. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still here.
They're buying a drop,
Mhm. I've been concerned about that one. When I heard that come out of somebody's mouth this past weekend, I was like, oh, that's heresy. You can't.
Well, my experience as a contractor now, and we've done some historic restoration projects. And it came down to really like one we did in Biltmore Village in Asheville. It came down to the local people more than it did the state or the national. And it was on the National Historic Register. To tell you the truth, as a contractor, we'd like pull our hair out of that thing, dealing with the local people. Over windows, we went into it thinking the windows were, I think we had a price we thought of about $30,000 and $150,000 later. We had the windows, which, you had to repair all the ropes and everything in them, but it was all local stuff. It wasn't national or state. So, I think that, as David is saying, locally, you're gonna have to do something to protect them.
Mhm.
Because I don't think if that sign was up, National Historic Register, that it would really protect that thing.
Could we legally, could we put this under the Uniform Development Code? Could we prohibit people from tearing this? I feel just like you do. I mean, that is so incredible. That'd be like going down that street in Georgetown and demolishing one of those houses built in 1729 or something. It's crazy. Can you do that legally? Maybe we could just put that in, we wouldn't have to worry, just
I don't think we do it.
There are ordinances, local ordinances in Charleston, places like that. But if the structure was built prior to 1915 or something like that, you cannot tear it down. You've got to remodel. And that's just a position that the municipality has always taken. And it makes for some expensive projects when you tear down a 200-year-old house and have to start all over. But there are some provisions in other towns where they do that.
It also gets challenging because then you get into floodplain issues and all of those stuff. That's right.
But it's in their historic.
But when you're on the coast, in the city of Georgetown, it's a little different.
So could you put that in the Uniform Development Code, or would that?
I'd probably have a separate ordinance for the historic preservation of homes a certain age. I mean, y'all have got several like that Austin House and places like that would hate to see somebody buy it and tear it down. So, because it's got a lot of historic significance. So, I mean, that's, I think We don't have anything like a historical preservation ordinance or anything like that, do we? Nope. I didn't think so.
See, I really don't see that as being ARB. I was like.
Correct.
I don't either. That'd be different.
Correct. I think it's a future agenda, if you want to pick that up and go down, because I think you'd have some support for it, but I don't want to think, we don't want to convolute this with
Okay.
that for sure. And as far as the landscape, what I was going to recommend is, I think we proceed with what we have and don't put that in there. And then at a later date, we can amend the architecture review design booklet and add that to it. I just don't know that because we got a second reading, if y'all want to, I think, and I'd like to, on June 14th, which is next Monday.
So Brian, are you suggesting that the landscape wording would wait until the sunset clause to 2 years?
No, I wouldn't. I think we could do something before, because I don't think the architectural review design brochure needed necessarily, did it need an ordinance to do that? Or was that will we adopt the architectural review design booklet at our second reading?
It'll be a resolution.
Yeah, it'd be a resolution, not an ordinance. So what I'm saying is, let's go ahead and stay the course. Let's not try to cram together a landscape description or overview or layout in the brochure. Let's go ahead and stay the course where we are. And if we want to amend that document with another resolution, 3 months, 6 months, however quickly you guys want to do that, we can do that. I think it's important. I just don't think we want to get off course.
We have a recommendation that says that designs that preserve to the extent possible existing trees and vegetation.
So it's already in there.
Okay.
So for now, and then we can expand upon that 3 to 6 months, whenever you guys feel like you got it.
Anybody in the meantime knows there's some landscape issues coming.
And it can be discussed as part of the professional
Yeah,
review.
again, that's.
That's good.
Professional.
Require our landscape plan.
There you go. There you go.
And he'll be talking about it big time.
Perfect. There you go.
I don't think there's something that would subject that recommendation to make it clear besides preserving existing.
Yeah, the only thing that would concern me a little bit that wouldn't be covered is if somebody does a tear down and they go in and get rid of all the landscape before they even pull the permit.
Well, but David had to
It's happening a lot.
talk to you about that, wouldn't they, Ryan? If they're getting ready to tear a house down. How's that?
Well, they gotta have a demo.
I mean,
And right now, the
I have to get a permit.
Doesn't address trees.
Gotta get a demo permit.
No tree ordinance, a lot of people think we do have one, but
Okay.
anyone can tear down any tree
They don't have to get a demo permit from the county.
for a structure, but not for any, and not for.
That's what I meant, structure.
I think you're right, Ron. We need to get this
I think in the interest of time, let's just go through real quick. The 5 things I had on my list is roof pitch, we discussed, small lots, we discussed, sketches, we're going to work on that. Sunset clause, I didn't hear any disagreement on that. Speak now or forever. And the last thing I have on my list is appeals. How are we going to handle appeals with the board? Now, I think I understood that it goes to circuit court, the way the state law pretty much dictates. I don't know that we can necessarily change that. I don't think we can. And I'll make a comment and I want to open it up to you guys, but the board of the ARB is a board that the town council appoints, nominates and votes on and appoints. And then you've got an architect. And my feeling on it is if it was 5-0 and architect all agrees, look, we're denying it, chances are there's something that's wrong with what these folks are trying to do. Now, if it's 3-2, and, you know, obviously David, the architect at the time, doesn't have a vote, it's the board that has 5 votes. So if it's 3-2 and they deny it, we were contemplating before, can the town council, before the vote is, kind of get involved, and I don't necessarily know that we want to, I don't think we want to do that. I'm just sounding it out, but my sense is that.
If I were on the town council, I don't think I would.
Yeah, exactly.
Get into that.
My sense is that if the board votes to turn it down, then that's where it is.
And just for comparison, the way the structure is over at Heritage, within the covenants, the board of directors appoints the ARB. But the ARB is described as unfettered by the board. They make their own decisions. There's no appeal back to the board of directors. And in the event that there's an impasse or dissatisfied applicant, their course is to seek legal.
How often did the board make denials where sort of the general?
You know, it's
sense
almost never complete, and it's never arbitrary. Because people come forward with a plan, this is their dream house, they paid somebody to develop it. And then they want to do things that don't fit under the British colonial scheme of design that they sort of label things for over there. So it's more of a back and forth of, can you take the black gutters and the black downspouts off? Can you do this or do that? Stone is an accent, it's not 80% of the front of the house, that kind of stuff. And so it's been a give and take. Never a complete, in my experience, a complete denial or a rejection. It's always.
But it's that give and take that the results were always better.
Mhm. And there's kind of a massaging. It's kind of like the applicant knows that it's probably not gonna go the way you want unless you kind of change these things around. There's some massaging, and then they know when they get to that final vote, there's pretty much some nodding around the table that, yeah, this is what we want, right?
Typically, the architect would not have a vote.
Right.
So, he's going to give recommendations to the board, and the board will.
But to your point, to appeal to the town council would, I think, probably diminish the independence and authority of the ARB.
Yeah, I wouldn't advocate that.
Yeah, you don't.
I think you want to be in the position of denial, be able to point at Ken and say, he did this,
And here's his phone number.
Make sure everybody has his cell phone number, right?
Make sure you give them his.
Well, if I could ask a question, in terms of, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, in terms of an appeal, given that we recognize that a fair amount of our intent it's kind of subjective. I mean, we know the look when we see it, we know what we want when we see it, and we know what we don't want when we see it. Okay, so we deny something on the basis of, it doesn't quite look like what we want. And they appeal that to the government. It strikes me that the government, the judiciary's got to be kind of black or white. Do you meet the 80% rule? Yeah. Do you meet the setbacks? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, they don't meet this subjective thing, but so what? It's not a law. Is that the way that it would typically go? Or will the judiciary tend to uphold the ARB decision?
Most of the time, that'll be what'll happen.
They'll uphold them? Even if they are subjective?
Yeah, there's gonna be some subjectivity in the whole process for sure. But usually they don't want to get involved in local politics. The circuit court doesn't, so they probably gonna uphold it on appeal. But anyway, one question I had for you was about, y'all don't need 10 members on this board, do you? The ARB board? That's fine, okay. 10 is a bad number. I'm gonna get 5 and 5 deadlock, can't do nothing. So, 5 is probably more workable. Plus, you got to find people who are willing to take the time to do it.
We got some good people. We do.
Go back to this.
You got some really strong.
Isn't it the case that when it goes to the circuit court, that their only review is whether the decision was contrary to law? So it's
Contrary to our ordinance,
Yeah, so it's very narrow. Unless they did something that just, required a different roof pitch.
Yeah.
Then the subjectivity is, it's gonna be hard to win one of those cases on appeal to the circuit court, because that's a very narrow grounds for appeal.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that the owner doesn't have.
Many legs to stand on. Yeah.
The owner doesn't have an opportunity to present to the ARB.
No, they do. No, they do.
At the hearing before the ARB, they can provide testimony and.
Okay, so just like we do zoning board of appeals. we would have-
That's right.
That's fair.
That would be his first
The first.
course.
The first step in the process.
Well, the first step is meeting with Brian, the architect, with that pre-meeting.
Yeah.
Which hopefully results in everybody's happy.
Yeah, a lot of them, it'll go so smooth because they'll like a professional, hey, this is great, let's do it.
Another question I would have is the ARB meeting open to the client, or is it a closed meeting?
I would say it would be open because everybody's got a vested interest in that, but that's my initial reaction. I haven't actually done any legal work to determine that. But the statute doesn't say anything about a closed meeting. The state law is pretty clear. They were gonna have a closed meeting, it probably would be in the statute. But I haven't seen that anywhere.
The majority of the ones that I deal with, that is completely closed.
Completely closed. So.
The ARB gets together with the architect, or the architect does it and presents it to the ARB.
Well,
All the suggestions, criteria, whatever, and then that's presented to the owner. But that ARB meeting is a closed meeting. I've never been to
One that was open to the
one that
public.
is open to the public.
Well, it strikes
Because
me
it can
that,
turn into kind of a mess, because, you know, it is a subjective thing and everybody's.
well, particularly if you've got neighbors and other people who are there are basically disagreeing with it, don't want the house there to begin with. And,
If it's legally okay, I would suggest that it's closed.
So when you say closed, you mean not even the homeowner
That's right.
goes?
That's
The homeowner is represented by the architect.
By his design professional, they submit their plans and then the ARB gets together whenever they can and sit down around the table, review it, mark it up, send the plans back marked up with a letter.
I like
Make
that
these
myself.
suggestions. Now,
The way they,
we're talking
I
about,
like that.
we're talking about a preliminary and a final. It's not a one or nothing kind of thing.
This is more than one step process.
Yes.
But, I mean,
Present a preliminary and you suggest that that's conceptual, because you don't want to finish the plans and spend all the money on it and then tell them they can't do it. So that's not fair. So preliminary schematic designs presented to ARB, then mark it up, make a suggestion, goes back, and then the final, which are something. So it'd be a two-step process, is what I would say.
in both cases, the meetings would be closed.
Yes.
If there's a difference of opinion, you won't give the owner and the architect an option to sit down and talk with the ARB about options.
the way they handle it at Heritage is that each applicant gets a designated ARB member to handle their application. And that person meets as often as necessary.
As a mediator between.
Right, and they actually describe the process back to the rest of the sitting ARB when that application is then reviewed for approval or modification. So there's some access, there's some dialogue, and you want to encourage a pre-construction or pre-design session to go through the guidelines, here's what we're hoping for, what we want you to look at, that sort of thing. I like that.
I think you've got to have some open
Yeah, for sure.
to get back to the ARB.
Yes, it's really
To the owner.
important that the
Yeah,
people that are building the
absolutely.
house, that,
It's just that
But not to the public.
ARB members get together and they're
Yeah.
openly discussing, aesthetic kind of things in front of an owner. It's not.
What else on appeals? Are we feeling okay with where we are on that?
There's language written on that, is there? I haven't read it in a while.
There's language in the draft ordinance that says that the notice of the meetings must be posted and delivered to all members and the local news media. It shall designate the time and place of the meeting, and it provides that the homeowner can, his architect can come to the meeting and make presentations. So it's the opposite of what you're saying. It's what the current draft says. We can change it if that's legal.
Well, the problem is if these people with lots of money and they're gonna be knowledgeable about some of that stuff. And they're entitled to make a record of the proceedings. So if they do have to go to circuit court, there's a record of what transpired. And they can't do that obviously if they're not involved in the process. So, I mean, that's a policy decision that council is gonna have to make on how they want to handle that, but I don't see, I've read this statute, I don't see anything in here that prohibits the I'm talking about the ARB statute. There's nothing in here that prohibits that. But, you can't make a record if you're not allowed to participate,
I think it's two different things, though. Having the owner and the designer involved in the process and have the opportunity to communicate with the ARB, that absolutely should exist and, back and forth should be there. But I think if that same owner and designer has to also fight against potential public disapproval or public disagreement with what they're doing, that's not right. That's two hurdles now.
I agree.
You got the ARB, plus you got to get your neighbors on board. I mean, I don't,
That's the reason it can't be an open meeting.
I think so.
I agree with you.
Shouldn't be.
And the mindset is that eventually every applicant's another neighbor. And people in the room are making a decision. Right. Neighbors.
No, we don't.
So Ken, what you're saying is that at Heritage, there's there's a member of the ARB is assigned as a liaison for the specific project that's brought. Okay.
How is the grandfather clause work?
Grandfather clause.
Yeah. The house is, the existing house is grandfather.
And the UDC, that's a,
Yeah, that's already in the, it's not in the new ordinance. Okay, that's existing.
But does it say, need more details where it's exempt from the architectural review board?
Well, it's written right enough that it is exempt. It covers everything except for the floodplain. Right. What's that? The non-conforming uses. Yeah, you have to comply with the flood. If you rebuild it, it doesn't comply with the setback requirements, and flood regulations. Some houses aren't able to meet the setback requirements, so you can build it back in the same footprint, but if you can pick your house up over 2 feet, build it 2 feet over and meet it, then that's what we'd like to see done.
I'm a little bit curious here. What did we decide on the meeting? Is it open?
I think that's a policy decision that needs to be discussed in the council meeting. Letting them make a decision as to how they want, put it on the agenda and let them make a decision as to how they want to proceed with that.
Yeah.
That's a point that needs to be addressed one way or the other.
yeah.
And then one way to consider it is have the applicant make a presentation with their architect and then have the ARB and equivalent to an executive session, have their deliberations. Take a vote at that point and then reconfirm the vote when they come back to a public session on the reasons it's been approved or disapproved or recommendations made. So that would take the interworkings with ARB into an executive session, but the results of that executive session then become public record.
That sounds like he's on top of it.
This man's done it. This man's done it. This man has done it.
It's about as fair as you can get.
There you go.
That'll take care of it.
I think that's we covered, right?
Anybody else have any burning questions? The small lot, what do we have left to do on the small lot exception discussion? Are we clear on that now, or we have any more work to do to make sure that we're covered?
I think as long as you give them 2,000 minimum.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we found out we don't have that many small lots to begin with.
Okay. All right. That was my biggest concern coming into this meeting, but
John did a great job.
John always does a great job. He's just. All right. That's it, man. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, good meeting.
Works up with them.
Yeah, works out there.
Yeah, works out.